Good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great day. It is actually very overcast here in Los Angeles today, and we are fortunate for that. We needed a bit of a cooling down, and it is, so that's great. I'm so excited to be here today with Lainey Cameron. Lainey wrote this book, The Exit Strategy, and really good book, brings up a lot of ideas about just the workplace and sexual harassment and how women can come together and be with one another and uplift each other and really be there for each other when sometimes we would be at odds, and instead choosing to lock arms is always a good thing. So excited to talk to Lainey about her own work experience and her life experience. In the book, the husband and wife have just a difficult relationship, and there's a lot going on there. And so I'm curious to learn where she got the storyline, if it's anything like story or not, because I know that she also does. Hello, how are you?
Hey, Julie, it's so nice to meet you.
So good to meet you too. I have so many questions about this book, Lainey. Oh my gosh, this just brings up so many things. And you, though, have worked for many years. And talk first about, your career and who you are.
Yeah, so I've worked in Silicon Valley for 20 plus years. This book was inspired from real life experience in terms of the sexism and what it's like to be the only woman in the boardroom. That was often my experience that, I would walk in and I would be like the one person in the investor meeting who was not a guy in a suit. And you have all kinds of conversations with yourself about like, what do I wear? Do I try and blend in, or do I just go full on wear the red dress and own it? And so it's such an interesting experience, and it's so subtle these days sometimes, and other times less subtle. I actually say in the back of the book that I had to tone down a little bit of the sexism in the book. For example, I have memories of being invited to go to strip clubs at the end of the day with my team. And it's like, it's a lose-lose situation, right? When you put someone in that situation, they can't win, right? Either they say no, and then they're like the killjoy in the team. You're not one of the boys. You're not part of the team. Or they say yes, and you sit there and you're like, this is horrendous. How am I supposed to like have a conversation while like, oh my God, I can't do this.
So did you ever go? Did you ever say yes?
Yes, it's happened.
And what was that experience like?
Imagine, right? And then people start bringing up
but how did you handle it? How did you handle it? How do you remember getting through it? Like, was there a guy there? Was there at least one guy who, could kind of understand your position and get you through that night? Or how did you?
Yeah, and you also you draw a line, right? So like, I have one particular memory where it was just like, you guys do what you want in a minute, but if you want to talk business, we're not doing that right now. Like, we are not talking business at this second in time. If you want me to have a drink and be with you, I will do that. But no, if you want to talk business, we're going outside. We're going somewhere proper to have a business conversation.
So they would just intermix. They would just intermix like the drinking and the strip club and
it's rare, right? That's a once or twice in a career experience, but it's the more subtle stuff that's a little invasive and pervasive, like being told to smile. How many times do we get told this as a woman, right? Random guys in the street say smile. And then we're seeing this thing with the masks that drives me crazy, where I've had several friends post on Facebook that guys ask them to remove their masks so they could see their face. And I'm like, because you can't judge me with the mask on, because I'm all about my beauty. Like, give me a freaking break. And so, it's interesting. It's become much more subtle, but it's still there in the background. And I'll tell you a fun little thing about this book, which you might appreciate because you want the story behind the book. I actually didn't set out to write a book about sexism in Silicon Valley. I set out with this idea of a wife and a mistress who meet across a negotiating table and are forced to work together. And then the background in Silicon Valley made sense because that's where I've worked for 20 plus years. And the sexism just was part of my experience, so I put it in the book. And so it's funny because now people tell me it's a bit of a Me Too book. It's a bit of a rallying call for women to believe in themselves and help each other. And I'm like, I love that. I love it. But I can't totally take credit that I set out with that intent, just as the book, the way it happened.
So where did you come up with the storyline that you wanted the wife and the mistress to meet and then have this great relationship?
So part of it was I wanted to write a book about my experience of working with other women, because we see all these movies and these books that talk about women catfighting and women backstabbing and not helping each other and the whole B words that we love to apply to women. And that's not my experience. Having been a female executive for 2 decades,
you see them lock arms and help each other.
Exactly. That's what I saw, is women helping each other, standing up for each other, opening the door for each other, creating opportunities, supporting each other. And so I just got kind of sick of reading these books about, I think I saw your show yesterday, you used the mean girl culture. And
yes.
My life experience is not mean girl culture. My life experience is women helping each other and lifting each other up for the most part. Yes, there's the odd exception here and there. And yes, teenage years are horrible, whether you're a boy or a girl. But I just wanted to write a book that showed that side of it. And it's been really interesting, because the most negative reviews that I've had on the book, and there haven't been very many, mostly I've been really surprised how positive the reviews have been. But the most negative reviews are people who say, I really wanted the wife and the mistress in this book to team up and the whole book to be about revenge on the guy. And that's not really what this book is. It's a book about friendship, right? It's a book about the women. And that
how
was
they
kind of what I had in my head.
Together and become a powerhouse, really, right?
Yeah, and I had this thing where if you make it about revenge, then you're making it about the guy. The book is still about the man, for God's sake.
Right. Then,
and I didn't want to write about him.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, and you're giving him all the power, and that's not what you're doing. Yes.
So that was kind of what I wanted. I really wanted to write a book about, the question I posed myself is, what would it take for women to still become friends in this really torturous, horrible situation where one is the wife and one is the mistress, and the cliches say it's not possible.
Right. Exactly. And that's what makes your book so special and really thought-provoking. But, going back to something you just said earlier about how your experience has never been about competitive women, and you have been fortunate not to see that growing up or in your career. And I would say that has not been my same experience. But I also attribute that to your upbringing and the way you were raised. And in the book, your dedication is to your mother. Do you want to read it, or should I? Do you have it in front of you, or maybe you have it memorized?
Sure. I've got it here. I've got the book in front of me. I'll read it for you.
I'd love that.
Sure. Maybe we can get her to watch this. I don't think she's on Instagram, but maybe I'll find a way. I'll find a way to get her to watch it.
I love this.
To my mom, my Scottish mom, Irene. Thanks for teaching me that women don't need to fear their strength or minimize their voice, and can be badass, resilient, caring, and open-hearted. Everything I needed to know in life.
It's beautiful. I love it. And I think that if all women were given that sort of confidence and that build up from early on from their mothers, I think there would be a lot less of this competitiveness and this, there's only room for one at the table, because you are clearly know and learned very early on that women can help each other and help each other to rise, and we can all have a seat at the table. And that's really an important lesson that I think is inborn so young and really taught to kids. And that is what helps people like you become so successful and collaborative and synergistic, and really very special thing that your mother taught you.
Oh, that's a nice way to put it. And I agree. I was very lucky, and I had a single mom. I didn't have a dad. My dad died when I was very young, 3 months old. And so my mother brought me up, and I never felt like I was lacking in anything, or like it's interesting. I had met men in my life because I have lots of uncles. My mother comes from a big Catholic family, 6 younger brothers. So I had 6 uncles in my life and no dad. Right. So it wasn't that there were no men in my life, but I think
exactly
being brought up by a single mom does actually help, maybe with confidence and with believing you can do things, that you don't have to always have someone to support you. I mean, it's great to have support, but that things are possible. I was always amazed by my mom's. The reason I say it in the acknowledgments or in the dedication there is I was always amazed by her resilience. she's a very resilient woman, right? That's a very hard thing to deal with. She actually lost her husband like literally a year after they got married. So honeymoon baby, 9 months later I'm born, 3 months later she loses her husband. And she really didn't bring me up in a house of grief, which would have been very easy, right? To really be bitter at the world because of that. And I'm grateful to her to this day that she was able to see past her grief and move forward and bring me up in a way that wasn't, you know, it could have been horrific. It could have been really hard to be brought up in a house where you felt lost around you all the time. And that wasn't my experience.
Well, that's amazing that she was able to really be such a great example for you, and so much strength and positivity. That is incredible. So you were really blessed in that way. And the 6 uncles, you definitely didn't have a void of men examples and people who were helping you along. So that's impressive also. So talk more about, so this is your first book, is that right?
Yes, this is my debut novel.
And did you always want to write a book? At what point did you realize you had a book in you?
That's such a great question. So if you'd have asked me 15 or 10 years ago, do you want to write a book? I would have said, yeah, maybe one day it'll be romance, because I love romance books.
Yes.
And this book.
Who's your favorite romance author?
Oh my goodness, so many. You know, the fun thing is I've gotten to meet romance authors like, if you like cowboy romance, Laura Drake is fabulous. I'm a big fan of Laura Drake's cowboy romance. But, you know, I'll read a lot of things. I love rom-com type romance as well. It's just, you know, it's funny right now in the middle of the pandemic where, you know, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know about that happy ending. It's stressful because, you know, trying to make plans ahead. Or can we plan a month ahead, 10 months, 3 months, 2 months? Who knows?
I
right?
know.
And so there's something wonderful about the catharsis in the happy ending. Reading a romance novel and knowing that it's going to end well. Knowing that, like, even it's really stressful and really bad stuff's happening, you know it's going to end well. And there's
like
something
those
nice
Hallmark
and
movies,
comforting.
right?
Yeah. So if you'd have asked me 10 years ago, I would have said romance. And then I went through some stuff in my life. I'm divorced and some pain. And this book is funny. It's almost like an anti-romance, right? The wife is trying to escape the husband over the course of the book.
Yes.
And so I had this just idea of the wife and the mistress and the friendship. And it all started with this concept of the wife picks up the phone and calls the mistress. And the mistress doesn't know that she's the mistress. And that phone call was kind of the genesis that it all went out from there. And that was the original image I had in my head. And I finished one of my startup jobs. Startup jobs are crazy. You know this, right? You work like crazy hours, you travel all the time. I've traveled so much, and I would never have been able to write a book while I was still working. And so I kind of several years ago gave myself 6 months and said, let's see if this book even has an ending. Like, I didn't even know if I was capable of finishing it. And that was the scariest thing ever, like jumping off a cliff to see if you have wings. It was so scary.
Absolutely. Yes. And good for you. So you just started writing. You had this idea. It was a pea-sized idea, and you just started writing, and the characters developed and came to life for you. Is that right?
And then I took a ton of craft classes, and I got book coaching, and I worked with a developmental editor. And so, like, it's hard because you have to go into it knowing that you don't know what you're doing, which is not something we do very often in life, right? We try and do the things we know we're good at.
Right.
And so I went into it and wrote my first draft. And from there, I realized that I didn't know how to edit. I didn't yet know how to get the emotion in the page in the way I wanted. I didn't yet know how to end each chapter on a cliffhanger that makes you want to keep reading and pacing. And I've learned all of those things, actually, interestingly, with help from other writers, often other women writers who kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, this is where you can learn that. And this is how you get there. I've been really fortunate that way.
And how did you meet these other women writers? I mean, did you immediately join a writing association, a group? What was your first?
I did. I was really fortunate that as soon as I finished my first draft, I actually Googled, like, what genre is my novel? Because I didn't know. I'm like, what does this count as? And I worked out that it was women's fiction. And so then I went, okay, are there any associations or groups of women's fiction writers? And that's how I found the Women's Fiction Writers Association, which has just over 1,000 members. It's mostly online, and they have an amazingly active Facebook group, and it's a wonderfully supportive group of women. And so every step from there was guided from that group, whether it's finding my beta readers, whether it's knowing which classes to take. And I've got so many friends in that group now. It's fabulous. That's really helped me. And also bridging out to other associations now. So I actually host like a writers group online on Thursday nights. We call it a writer support group, which is cross genre. We have sci-fi and all kinds of other writers. But when COVID started, we realized that people were feeling really isolated. Even though we think writers are introverts, me the exception, but think they're introverts and they're fine to be locked in their houses and not talk to people. Writers were struggling, like being on their own, not being able to connect anymore.
I think it's when you're forced, when you're like on forced lockdown, even the introverts are like, wait a minute, I need some socialization. I need to see another human once in a while.
So we do that on Thursday nights and it's wonderful. We call it a writer support group. And if people are having problems, we talk about them, whether they're writer problems or just problems with getting to the writing. Writing is hard, right?
Absolutely.
And you add all this other stuff.
Well, and I've been meeting people who are, you know, watch this show or just people who reach out to me and ask me about, you know, wanting to write their first novel and joining a writing group. So what would your recommendation be to those people? Should I have them reach out to you and join your writing group?
Sure. I'm always happy to have people join us on a Thursday, or maybe I can help you find the right group. Like genre groups can be really good because like, let's say you write sci-fi and you join the Write Association for sci-fi, people are going to know about your genre and what works there. And even down to the level of like lengths are different, right? The length of a romance versus a sci-fi is different. So genre groups are good. Local groups are good, right? A little harder now. But, you know, I'm part of a group that meets on Wednesdays and we are based locally here in San Miguel when I'm in Mexico. And we just moved it all online. So we still meet on Wednesdays and we write together. We tell each other what we're going to do. And then we write for 2 hours silently. And then we get back together and talk about how it went. And it's just a nice way to have accountability to keep going.
Absolutely.
Accountability partners really help.
So helpful. Accountability partner is so necessary in like every aspect of life. From exercise to writing to life in general, right?
Isn't that the truth? It's funny, you know, it's hard to be accountable only to yourself. It's weird how hard that is. But when you've got a partner
I think we're pulled in so many directions. We're pulled right here on social media and it's like 8 hours can go by. We're like, oh my gosh, where did the day go? Right?
So true. So true.
Yes. So now that you have all this writing experience, you have your writers group, you know what you're doing, are you working on your second book?
Absolutely. You know, I was working on it before the first one was coming out, and then I had to set it aside for a while. While we did all the promotion and the launch and the editing of the first book. And then I got back to it for a few weeks after we launched this book. It was great. Once it was out there, I got back to it, and I'm about 20,000 words in on the draft of the next one. And then I had a really cool thing happen just over a week ago where the exit strategy won a competition. It won a gold medal in the Reader's Favorite Awards. But even cooler, it became one of 10 books.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But the cool thing is it became one of 10 books being evaluated for television by a production company. And so I had to step back from the new book and start working on a synopsis again, a movie style synopsis for the old book to send
Very cool.
I just finished that yesterday. So I'm actually excited to get back to book 2 again now.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of meat in the exit strategy. So I can absolutely see it really would, you know, speak to so many people, right? In the venture capital world, women, also the whole science theme that you have going on. And how did you choose that the biotech company would be delving in on finding heart cures?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I wanted it to be something significant, right? Like, it was important to me that Carly Santos, who is the character who's founded this company, have a genuine passion for it. It's not about making money to her, it's about saving lives. And so it needed to be something significant. And so to me, like, heart was the most obvious, significant one. It's funny, I've had some questions when I put it out to beta readers. I had one of the beta readers came back and said, I'd like to understand more about exactly how this heart solution works. It's going to do diagnostics. And I had to respond and say, it's fiction. I made it up. It's not real.
Right? Oh. Yeah, because everyone's looking for a solution for every disease and for everything. So that's really interesting.
Yeah,
so now you have to,
sorry, it's not real.
Now you have to actually go to the scientists and create that company and create that.
You know, what else was in my mind was thinking, I'm sure, of all the Theranos stuff and the idea of like faking tests and the idea of putting patients in danger. for profit, right? And so that isn't the case in this book. In fact, my key character, Carly, is doing all the right things, but she has a press meltdown where someone writes that her company is doing similar and they're going to put patients at risk. And I just saw how huge and how difficult that is to deal with when your company is in the middle of a firestorm. And so I thought that's a good way to put her in a really difficult situation as the CEO of this company.
Right. Excellent. And it's perfect. You know, when I was wondering, you know, why you chose heart, I thought, well, because, right, it's about love. And in this book, it's sort of the breakdown, and that you couldn't trust the stereotypical kind of love, but you could find love in friendship, and it could propel you forward.
I love that. How had I not thought of that before? I love that.
Maybe we'll co-write a book.
There you go.
Now that, you see, I think co-writing a book is the way to go, because that is how you stay accountable. I interviewed Liz and Lisa about a month ago, and I love how, you know, one of them will write Sunday to Wednesday and then give the book to the other, or give the chapter to the other, and the other will go Thursday to Saturday. And I thought, that is the perfect way to write a book. Keeps you completely accountable.
Yeah, it is. And I know, like, Heather Webb and Hazel Gaynor also write together. They write historical fiction, and it's beautiful. Like, their books that they write together are absolutely gorgeous. Their last one was actually like letters back and forth. So it was really interesting how they were able to use that.
Nice.
But yeah, I think
I'll have to look them up.
Liz and Liz are fabulous. They write such fabulous books.
So yeah, really great. Yes, yes, yes. And they've been doing it a long time. I think they have like 8 books. And so that must work really well. But I
have 2 friends, it's not public yet, 2 friends who are writing an amazing rom-com that's set during this crazy time period that's going to be coming out, I hope, next year, which is fabulous. And they're co-writing it, just like you say.
That's amazing. There will be so many books coming out, right, during this time, and what everyone went through and the different perceptions.
And I think people want happy books out of this. I mean, okay, I'm sure that's not true for everybody. Some people want to read about thrillers, about apocalyptic, the world's ending. Me right now, I need the happy stuff.
Absolutely.
And so, like,
me too.
I think this idea of like a rom-com set around this period, that good stuff can come out the other side, is something we're all going to be kind of excited to read.
Absolutely. While you were writing this book, what did you do when you had moments of, I don't know where to go from here, or when you had writer's block?
Oh, that is so interesting. And it's such a good question. I've tried different things. Like, I like running. Running works. I actually like puzzling. Jigsaw puzzles. I was never into jigsaw puzzles before I started writing, but there's something about, like, your brain is focused on the puzzle, so the book is kind of percolating in the back of your head. And so when I had a plot problem, very often I would just sit and puzzle for 30 minutes and not try to solve it, just let it work itself out. Right. It's kind of like the same idea of, like, sleeping on it. If you can take your brain off it for a while, it's still working, right? Your brain's still working on that problem.
So you just wouldn't push and focus on it, but you'd go do the puzzle and then you'd come back and the thoughts would come to you. Is that right?
Yeah. Or try to talk someone else through it. Although I find that works better for plot, like, problems. Like, when there's something that isn't quite working, if you try and describe it to someone else, very often you're like, well, then this happens and then that happens. And you go, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. You realize yourself, like, just in trying to explain it to someone.
Yeah. I like that idea, though. You're doing the puzzle and you're just sitting quietly with yourself. That's great.
It works. Doing the dishes, I think, works too. Things that just take your brain somewhere else.
Well, you're also a doer, right? You've been very successful in your career. And so for you, doing something else probably just keeps you going, and then you can come back to it and keep going on that. So you're just going.
It's funny. My husband keeps trying to get me, my new husband keeps trying to get me into yoga, and we do yoga several times a week. And it's funny, like you say, I'm a doer, and I have such a hard time getting my brain to not, like, be elsewhere. It's a work in progress for me. Like, I'm writing a book while I'm doing yoga.
I agree with you. I can't do yoga at home because I feel like there are so many things pulling me in different directions that I can't just sit there and focus on the yoga. For me, I have to be in the yoga studio, has to be 150 degrees, and so I'm boiling hot that I just want to get through it, and the door's locked and I can't leave.
That's funny. You know, there's something about, I also do Zumba. I do online Zumba classes or video recorded Zumba classes. And with those, I'm so busy trying not to fall over that I'm more able to focus.
Right. Whatever keeps our focused is where we are.
Exactly.
Right? That's amazing. All right. So what else? So you're in Mexico right now. And
I am.
when you're writing there, where do you go to write? Are you writing in your home? Are you writing outside? What works for you?
So normally in normal world, I would do a mix of my home, and then Wednesday I actually go to a beautiful writers group, which is in a gorgeous arts center. And then on some days I would go to coffee shops. There's some beautiful coffee shops here, even ones that are outside, which is lovely. I also love writing on my roof. We actually have a roof deck on the house here, and I love to write outside in the shade on the roof. Right now, we're not really leaving the house. It's a challenging time, you know, even though some things are open in town and everybody's doing their best. Mexico's definitely got a challenge right now with COVID. And so we're trying to be safe and be careful. So mostly I'm working at home. The funny thing is you're not in my writer's office today. Normally you would see my bookshelves behind me because we actually had some people in the house doing a little bit of work for us. And we asked them the question, what would happen if we tried to get some more light into my writer's office? Because it's very dark. It's beautiful, but very dark. Big bookshelves, but very, very dark.
Yes.
And the workman said, oh, no problem. We'll just put in some skylights. So suddenly yesterday, they're removing half the roof of my office and putting in skylights.
Yeah, that's a big job, I bet. You're going to get a lot.
Well, it's Mexico. They're very good at this stuff. Very, you know, efficient. Whereas you might wait 6 months to get someone to work on it and get planning permission and do a lot of things in the States, they're like, no, we're good. Let's just bang a hole through the roof and we'll put some skylights.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Just get it done.
Get it done. So it'll be done this week. It just started yesterday.
Good. So it should be done by tonight.
Pretty much by Friday for sure. But it's lovely because I love on my desk, I love to lay out my papers. I'm still a paper girl. I love to have the physical manuscript or the scene I'm working on sometimes printed out. And it's so dark in there that I'm literally like almost flashlighting trying to see my pages.
Right. Wow. So your second book, can you tell us a little bit about it? Like where will it be centered?
So it's obviously true that all fiction is somewhat inspired from real life. And so my first book, somewhat inspired from my life in Silicon Valley. This book, somewhat inspired from my life as a digital nomad and as an Instagrammer. So it's about a digital nomad Instagrammer, actually an adventure travel Instagrammer, one of those people who throws themselves off mountains. And she has a dark secret. So she's super popular. She's got like 1 million followers or some large number of followers. But she has a dark secret that she's actually living under a new name and identity. And she has left her own old life behind. And for a very good reason. And at the beginning of the book, her old life is back on the television. And she's at great risk of being exposed and forced back into her teen years, which were really horrendous and traumatic for her. And so the book is about, is she going to come to terms with who she was, or is she going to manage to keep in her new identity and move forward from there?
Very fascinating. That is great. And so that whole idea came from, did you go through any of this yourself? Sort of in your own mind?
I am writing under a pen name. Lainey Cameron is my pen name. So certainly I've had to deal with a little bit of the dual personality. How do you manage it? I'll tell you a funny story. When my husband and I got married last year, we've been together almost 10 years, but we got married last year. He actually said his vows to both of me. He said his vows to Lainey and my real name in the wedding. Because
so you literally are a dual personality.
I can relate. So yeah, and Lainey is actually what all my friends have always called me. So when I wanted a pen name, I thought, well, I'll just take my nickname. It's going to be easy. If someone calls me from across the room, I'm going to turn around. And so that's how I did my pen name. But that's kind of how do you deal with these two identities and when they collide and how do you manage that was something I was feeling familiar with.
Yes. Why did you choose a pen name?
It's a very easy answer to this one. When I started writing, I took, like I said, 6 months to write the book. And I started communicating with people and kind of putting things out there as I was writing, sharing about my writing experience. And I realized that when or if I went back to my job in Silicon Valley, if I'm sitting across from a CEO and I'm going to be the head of marketing for your company and they say, let me get this right. I just Googled you. You write about people like me for a living? Like, am I going to be in your book? I was like, that's not going to work. I can't have people freaking out thinking that I'm going to be writing about them every moment of every day.
Absolutely. Very smart. So there is your pen name. That is where all of your creativity lies. Your husband is married to both of you. He's got the business side and the creative. That's great. Well, congratulations to you on all that you're doing. Excited for the exit strategy. Everyone will have to pick up their copy, and excited for the next book you have coming out. And I'll have to follow up about a writing group, because I know that lots of people are interested in finding writing groups, and some people just don't know how and where to look. So I'll follow up and we'll get some more people linked in to start writing.
Awesome. And I love talking to other writers. You know, if anyone ever wants any help, like, I do a lot of things to help other writers. I'm doing a webinar tomorrow night on marketing, how to market your book for the Women's Fiction Writers Association. So if you ever want any help, send me a message on Instagram. This is more for people who are watching here who maybe trying to work out how to do the right thing as a writer. I'm always happy to respond. I love when people reach out to me about anything, writing, readers, whatever.
That is wonderful. You are just such a happy, positive soul. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate being invited.
Take care, Lainey. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Have a great day. We have another interview at 10:30.